Hey guys, it's Meal Before Me, and I'm back with another snack review. This time I'm comparing Lindt's classic milk chocolate bar to their new oat milk version. Now you know I like to kick things off with some facts before getting into the ratings, so here's a brief history on Lindt. It was founded in 1845 by a Swiss chocolatier named Rudolf Lindt, and in 1879 he invented conching, either accidentally or on purpose. And conching is basically the process of mixing heated chocolate continuously until it becomes rich, shiny, and smooth. In 1949, the company developed its recipe for Lindor chocolate, which is Lindt's name plus the French word for gold, and bing bang boom, history was made. Today, Lindt has lots of different recipes and brands. I'm reviewing their classic recipe, and as far as I've seen, the only classic recipe candy bars with an oat milk version are the milk chocolate and the salted caramel. I hate caramel, and I love my teeth, so I'm only trying the milk chocolate. Hopefully this will be interesting for those of you who want that cacao, but can't have dairy. So this snack review will be a bit different because all I want to know is how the oat milk version stands up to the dairy milk. I've had the dairy bar many times. It's creamy, it's lovely, I'm a fan, but I've never had the oat milk bar because it's new. So I'll be rating both candy bars on 4 things: flavor, texture, melting, and of course repeatability, meaning would I eat it again? Starting with the most important question, how does it taste? And I'm ready to find out. To the table! Since I want to limit the number of hairs I pull out fighting with noise when I'm trying to record, quick reviews like this one will just be voiceover, so no listening to me munch in real time, unfortunately. But I will still show you the real-time footage, including my wonky fingernails, alright? I work with my hands, they break all the time, you'll get used to it. First is the unboxing. They're candy bars, so nothing as exciting as when I review meal kits. Speaking of which, if you haven't seen it, feel free to check out my last review comparing Blue Apron and HelloFresh, also not sponsored. And let me know in the comments which meal delivery services you want me to try in 2023. I honestly need a break from cooking for those reviews, so I welcome suggestions for pre-made meal companies. But you can still recommend meal kits. I just won't be doing any more big reviews like that for a while. Back to the chocolate, I wanted to see if there were any obvious differences right out of the gate, and boy howdy, we've already got a problem. The dairy is a lovely chocolate brown, much like myself, but the oat milk looks like it spray painted its face and said, "Witness me." That chalkiness is called bloom, and it can happen for 2 reasons. Sugar bloom is caused by moisture dissolving the sugar on the surface where it crystallizes, and fat bloom is caused by Uber Eats, or in the case of chocolate, by an abrupt change in temperature, or the chocolate being poorly tempered to begin with in a way that causes the fat to separate out. I bought the candy bars at the same time, and full disclosure, I did toss them in the fridge for a bit, which isn't great for chocolate despite the fact that I never have an issue doing it, so I don't know if the oat milk bloomed because of that, or if it was already like that when I bought it. Now the good news is that bloom doesn't make chocolate inedible, it's fine. The bad news is that it can make the texture more grainy, which kind of sucks for this review since I won't necessarily know what's being caused by the bloom and what's being caused by the use of oat milk. But it will make the test at the end of the video more interesting, so we'll carry on keeping the bloom in mind. Next up is the ingredients, starting with the dairy bar. There's sugar, cocoa butter, milk, chocolate, skim milk, soy lecithin, barley malt powder, and artificial flavor. It says soy lecithin is an emulsifier which stabilizes a mixture so it doesn't separate, and I think barley malt is used as a sweetener, but don't quote me on that. Checking the weight, the dairy bar is 4.4 ounces, and you know I whipped out the scale to check. It actually weighed 4.9 ounces with the packaging still on, while the oat milk bar is 3.5 ounces and weighed exactly 4 on the scale. So the packaging weighs about half an ounce for both bars. Speaking of packaging, the oat milk looks the same size as the dairy at first glance, but you can see that the oat milk packaging is actually thinner. I can see it at least. It may not be that obvious on camera, considering I've done nothing to improve the image quality. That's what happens when you're pressed for time. As for the price, the difference in weight means you're getting slightly less for slightly more. The dairy bar cost $3.29, but it was on sale for like $2, while the oat milk bar cost $4.69 and wasn't on sale. Never say I don't sacrifice for this channel, because I'd never pay $4 for a candy bar otherwise, I tell you that. Subscribe for being cheap. Moving on to the nutritional info, the dairy said there's about 4.5 servings per container, and a serving size is 7 pieces, which would mean there are roughly 31.5 pieces per bar. Both bars have 6 rows of 5 pieces, making 30, so the number of servings is a rough estimate. Comparing the info between the 2 bars, notably the dairy has 10 less calories per serving than the oat milk and a little less total fat. It has cholesterol and sodium, while the oat milk has neither. It's got some fiber, the oat milk doesn't, and the dairy has more sugar, more protein, a lot more calcium, and nearly twice as much potassium. Checking the oatmeal's ingredients, it contains sugar, oat milk powder, cocoa butter, almond paste, chocolate, soy lecithin, and natural flavors. It's kind of funny to me that the real chocolate has artificial flavors while the fake chocolate has real ones. And yes, I called non-dairy chocolate fake. Fight me. But first, it's time to try them, starting with the dairy bar since it's the benchmark to be beat. And like I said, I've had it many times before, just not recently. I think I had it the last time maybe in spring. By the way, if you couldn't tell how much thinner the oat milk bar is with the packaging on, you should be able to see the difference now. So, revisiting the dairy bar, for texture, I give it a 5 out of 5. Biting into a square, it had enough chew to feel substantial and premium, and then I let the whole thing melt, and it coated my tongue heavily, so it's very rich. Maybe more rich than creamy, if that makes sense, because of how thick it is. Overall, a great texture for a chocolate bar, no complaints here. For taste, I give it a 4 out of 5. It has that hint of vanilla I like milk chocolate to have, even though vanilla isn't an ingredient, and it's a little buttery, but I take 1 point off for it having a hint of something almost reminiscent of alcohol. The drinking kind, not the rubbing kind. It's like if you had a cherry cordial and you removed the cherry filling and just ate the chocolate. It would still have that mild taste of liqueur soaked into it, and I'm not a fan of that because I don't like alcohol, but it's so subtle that you may not pick up on it. I do wonder though if it's the barley malt giving it that note since malt is used in brewing. If any of you have eaten barley malt on its own, do let me know how it tastes. I'm very curious. As for repeatability, would I eat the dairy bar again? The answer is definitely, just not often. Like I said, it's pretty rich and I don't really have a sweet tooth, mainly because I'd still like to have a tooth when I'm older. But for the record, if dental decay weren't a thing and sugar didn't wreak havoc on the body, I'd stuff my face with sour Skittles, Airheads, Jolly Ranchers, and gummy worms all day like a proper adult. Moving on to the oat milk bar, I give it a 2 out of 5 for texture. It has a nice chew when I bite into it, just like the dairy bar, but it's very waxy on the tongue and didn't feel like it was melting at all. Now, as far as I've heard, waxy chocolate is often an indicator of lower quality chocolate lacking in the cocoa solids department, but I don't know if that's the case here, so I'm not going to accuse it of being lower quality. So the texture left a lot to be desired, but I give it a 4 out of 5 for taste, keeping in mind that I could hardly taste it anyway through the waxiness. So I guess I should say that whatever little taste I could get, I enjoyed. It's not as sweet as the dairy bar, and it has a nuttier flavor, which I guess makes sense given the oats and almond paste. I wouldn't say it tastes like milk chocolate, but like flavored milk chocolate. That said, for repeatability, would I eat it again? No, thank you. The taste is fine, but it's way too waxy. I genuinely don't think I've ever had chocolate that feels that cheap in my mouth, which is kind of inexcusable considering it costs more than the dairy one. But this is the first time I've ever had a non-dairy chocolate bar, so I don't know if they're all kind of like that. This one could be good by those standards, but by my standards, it's waxier than a Hershey bar, and for context, I don't eat Hershey bars, okay? I'm not a candy snob. I just noticed pretty early in life how subpar Hershey chocolate is compared to pretty much everything else. That's why I don't mess with it anymore beyond someone handing me a freebie on Halloween. But let's say for argument's sake that the bloom made things worse. I did say I'd be rating the bars by how they melt, and remelting bloom chocolate is one way to blend it back together. So let's call the bloom a happy accident. Now I get to see how the oat milk melts and if melting it improves the texture. I know melting may seem out of place for a taste test, but one problem with non-dairy products is that they don't always hold up to all the same uses as their dairy counterparts. Milk and cream mix really well with my tea, for example, but I've yet to find an oat or nut milk that doesn't separate from it or that provides the same smooth mouthfeel as dairy. And when you're cooking or baking, substituting plant stuff for animal stuff like it's one-to-one can lead to all kinds of undesirable results. So I wanted to know how well the oat milk bar melts regardless of how it tastes, because being able to melt chocolate down for coating and dipping is one of its perks. To start, I melted a few squares from both bars in glass ramekins, then let them cool. I was going to melt them side by side, but my large pot up and walked away, I guess, and I couldn't fit both ramekins in the small one, so I did them one at a time. This technically isn't double boiling because the ramekins are sitting in the water, but it did the job. The bowls heated up slowly enough for the chocolate to start melting within about a minute, then I took them out. I splashed some water in both ramekins by accident, and moisture is the enemy of chocolate, so even though I poured it right back out, only time will tell if it had an effect. Giving them a stir, you can see that the oat milk's bloom is gone. The color is very similar to the dairy now, with a tinge more red, and it's super glossy, way shinier than the dairy. Maybe for the same reason it's waxier than the dairy, I have no idea. But the most exciting thing is how melting it released the flavor. It now tastes exactly like Nutella, and I'm a sucker for chocolate and hazelnut, so that's a huge improvement. The texture, however, got really grainy in a way that it wasn't prior to melting it. Now, I could take full responsibility for that and say that it seized up because I overheated it or because I let water get in the bowl for a fraction of a second, except that I did exactly the same thing with the dairy bar and it was fine. It was incredibly smooth, rolling around like cream, while the oat milk pulled away from the glass, almost like there was some elasticity to it. It's hard to explain and I'm not even sure if you can see it, but suffice it to say the texture was night and day. The dairy bar's flavor was also enhanced, but not in a good way this time, because it made that semi-fruity, alcohol-y note more pronounced. You might love that. I didn't. Finally, letting them sit and cool for a few minutes as I continued to stir them, the dairy remained smooth and spreadable while the oat milk continued to clump. Again, I could be to blame for that, but only partially because the dairy bar got the same treatment with different results. So I'm convinced that some of the oat milk bar's issues stem from its ingredients. Regardless, my final verdict is that unless you have a dietary reason to go with the oat milk or you want to melt it down as a Nutella alternative, stick to the dairy bar. But let me know what you think if you've tried either of these, and if you even like chocolate at all. I meet a ton of people who don't, which I find interesting, to say the least. In fact, if you don't like chocolate, let me know in the comments why. I would very much like to know. In the meantime, subscribe if you like my style of food reviews. Thanks so much for watching MBM, and I'll see you snackies when I'm backies.